I am Netmuvasitan. Welcome to the final chapter of Leviathan. Let's see how this ties into Limbus Company. Previously on Leviathan, Virgilius, the Red-Gazed, fought against the distorted Jumsun with his hemokinetic granting argument, EGO, or whatever you want to call it, after basically giving Carmen the finger. It was much less one-sided than the previous round, but the distorted ring maestro wasn't out of it. But despite his best efforts, including an explosion of paint in the color fixer's general direction, he was no match for Virgilius's blood-based constructs. But it wasn't him that killed the mad artist. It was Trident Friday, the abnormality that escaped the facility and somehow ended up there. He was able to elude it by hiding in a blood puddle, but he couldn't stay there forever, as he'd be trapped if he stayed in there too long. During this, Gubo, the N-Corp employee, and Asia, the scientist he was there for, decided to leg it, leaving Nansiul for dead, literally, as Shrouded Friday targeted the turncoat and delivered circular saw-based death, leaving Virgilius alone with the anomaly, where he eventually figured out that, to stop it from attacking, he needed to not look at it. We then continue with where we left off. Virgilius still had his eyes closed. From what he could figure out, seeing someone is like capturing it in your eyes, put into consciousness through a window called the eye. The glass in that window being so transparent that it seems like there'd be no distortion. But it's a biased landscape engraved into the hearts, so he should look at it, but don't put it in his eyes. Well, the blind would be completely safe from that. Anyway, a life with a will, it tends to focus on what he wants, something that's always far away, so they always keep their distance. Like that. Man who fails will look. Yeah, I'm not sure about the translation of that last part, but as far as Virgilius believed, it didn't matter what it was, he just thought so. Even if it was a child killer, or the one that caused Garnet to start distorting in that cocoon. He felt no emotion about this. There were just obstacles in the road to be cleared. He was silent as he was thinking about this, still closing his eyes. But his chain of reasoning led him to look at it. It was just moving. Apparently its attention was elsewhere. Yet all others that could look at it were dead. So how was that possible? Then he remembered that there was still one who could keep an eye on the situation. Garnet, within that cocoon. Before he could walk a few hastily made steps, he noticed something that made him express his annoyance of how the situation was getting worse, saying, "Oh, damn." The saw blades of Shrouded Friday were roaring and trying to cut into something as hard as a jewel. It was sounding like it was being shattered into pieces, just like jewels with garnets. Nay, it's who I think it is. The sound of huge crystals were cracking and breaking. It was over in an instant and stopped working. Silence had returned. Garnet was watching everything. He was fighting for an unpredictable hatching, watching from that opaque and lonely space. Then Virgilius closed his eyes and walked slowly towards it, to not be the next target. Both his arms holding his blood-based sword constructs, and his closed eyes were trembling. It takes much for someone like him to feel that nervous about that situation. He was also silent as he stopped right in front of it, or at least he felt like it was right in front of it. He previously thought that he could cut it down without emotion, with a knife soaked in blood like that. It'd be the end as if nothing happened. However, he dared not see it arriving in pain. He decided to open his eyes. Not long after, inside the box that was the main body, the eyes opened up, which made it attack with its saw-toothed mechanical arm. Virgilius knew his reserves were low, yet he needed to squeeze enough blood out of him. The blood cloak covered with his own resentment, more so than before. He let the saw blade cut him for blood to flow. He was patient. He let a little squirt out to endure that mechanical atrocity. He then placed his hand on the metal box that was part of Schadenfreude and looked deep into its eyes, asking, "What are you looking at that makes you so happy?" Before the blood runs out and his body failed him, he felt craving. A bloodlust, or bloodthirst, unrelated to being a blood fiend. He thrust his knife deep into that box, that gaze, people, and fates, that have only watched the pain in his life until now, as if to curse everything that's happening in that world. He poured all his energy into it, the blood blade. It wasn't a tool to kill, but to inflict pain on Schadenfreude. It then became a sword of thorns, which he used to continue attacking the eye sockets. It won't save anything. He hasn't done that, and he believes that he never will. He felt as if the eyes were dry but interesting, as if peeking into his life from the start up until that point. His impatience and ignorance, which let Garnet, which he was capable of protecting, die. Even this seemed visible to those eyes. His actions made Schadenfreude shake violently, as if to escape from the pain. It also pressed its saw blade violently to cut him out of this position. Virgilius was full of resentment. He was greedy for pleasure, while not paying any price for spying on tragedy. At least on this occasion. Asking if the fruits of his fortunes were coming only now? He didn't think so. His anger was for himself for feeling Garnet. His anger directed at what was spying on Garnet without forgetting it. He was still silent. He stopped his blade from stabbing it. Two eyes with tears of blood were looking at one eye with tears of blood in the hole. Ah yes, hemolacria. Usually benign, but can be a symptom of another condition that might not be benign. Well, in this case, being stabbed repeatedly by a blood-based construct is certainly not benign, is it? He realized that it was him who was spying. The box was vibrating like a scream. Virgilius hoped that it was a scream of agony. To get the point across more than he already has, he thrust his blood-stained blade deeper into that hole. As it reached the depths of that box, it felt like something was caught. He aimed to slice as hard as he could. It cut the box and the flesh inside it whole, the veins of blood soaring to the ceiling, and then fell like a broken hope without finding a place to rest. The red rain was descending, drenching him and the lab with blood, including the machinery. Some of that blood was his. Some of that blood was from others. The rest of the bodies were scattered in arbitrary shapes. The fishy smell lingered. He couldn't imagine hell looking much worse. He had already seen this kind of landscape. Seeing it as crazy. The silence was broken when a speaker somewhere in the lab sounded. It was Lan Yen. And Virgilius knew what was going to be spoken, due to one of the dots that showed him. A reality where something nasty happened to him in a reality where Garnet was not in that lab, but remained in the office. But he didn't want to be quiet, even though his mind was always quiet. Lan Yen asked if Virgilius could hear him, finding the right frequency, believing that he'd hear it, wanting to tell him something, even though he didn't sound like he was in good shape, judging by the heaviness of that breathing. Telling Virgilius that the office was, well, it turned out the attack in both that alternate reality and that reality was because the video was recorded from, well, the one from that lab to be more precise. That lab was in N Corp territory, District 14. Oh, yeah. Apparently it resulted in more than one taboo hunter appearing. Lan Yen was in the middle of a battle. Yeah. Those that record footage or even possess it are targets for taboo hunters. Well, those that are with those who either have the footage or recorded it are likely seen as accessories for that action. We've heard of what one of these taboo hunters can do in the distortion detective. Imagine a team of these specialized fixers under the direct employ of NCorp. The taboo of that district is that video footage recording is forbidden. Those that do that or possess recorded footage, they end up dead or captured, never to be seen again. Partly due to them and the ring sharing the distrust of anything that they can't see, and likely value what they can see. As for what happens within NCorp and where all of those taken alive go, that much is uncertain. Perhaps in Limbus Company more will be revealed. But for now, let's focus on this. Lan Yen thought that Virgilius could negotiate with NCorp before they sent a taboo hunter to their office. Never mind a whole team of them. Which was a large enough one to make that a possibility. Unfortunately, that video had a fairly high-grade taboo, and that was something completely unacceptable. They were reversely observed and identified. They'd retrieve that video and deal with anyone who has seen it. Which was why the cancer known as Gubo was there in the auction house of the ring, Through that auction, the ring was going to go to that lab somewhere in Encore, hidden in the corridor. After identifying the location, he retrieved Asia and returned. Apparently, N-Corp and V-Corp had some kind of arrangements between each other that prevented the taboo hunters from attacking taboo violators outside of District 14. As in those that record video footage in District 14 and then go to another district, in the hopes that they could escape retribution. Which explains why Vesper Crabro and the Distortion Detective had no jurisdiction within District 11, K-Corp territory. Yeah. The fact that N-Corp's taboo hunters invaded his office located in V-Corp's nest. Wait, it was in the nest? Clearly, Philip missed that part of District 22 when he delivered his fiery apocalyptic flames. Anyway, that agreement has apparently ended. Clearly, V-Corp's power had weakened since that. Well, the attack of the crying children. Virgilius met several people who were apparently superiors in V-Corp. Outwardly, it was a social visit. They told him that they can call on them whenever it was needed, saying that they were always on Virgilius' side. Words without weight. Lip service at best. The weight that was exerted was heavier with N-Corp than with him. The words of those superiors, meaningless. Clearly, the power of V-Corp had weakened significantly since the attack of the crying children. Then Lan Yem told Virgilius that he wasn't worried about being able to negotiate with the golden horses of N-Corp. Likely those in charge of that wing. Either that or another translation error. But considering that Rikoko was stabbed in the back by Nuncial, and Nuncial was killed by Charon and Denver, he was likely found by the taboo hunters and killed. Or is it she? I'm not sure. Well, whatever, that one's dead. Landien told Virgilius to take good care. Yeah, clearly he didn't know of Rikoko being stabbed in the back. Virgilius then heard someone coming from the speakers that wasn't Nansuel. Clearly, he was now dead. This voice was saying faintly, "And my special allowance. Big. To those three. Hand over." Communication was cut since that final message. Compared to the countless despairs, this moment was no different from the pain of a single piece of paper. Well, that wouldn't be painful. It'd be a paper cut at best. Well, not unless it was red tape. In that case, it'd be increasingly more painful, although I don't think it's either of those, is it? Well, regardless, silence returned. But the pain he felt wasn't there anymore. But he felt like a knife was cutting into the stinging wound again. Yes, a stinging wound. He was holding back from the blood being spilt out. He was enduring. He felt like his end was nearing as he used up almost all of his strength to take out Shredder Friday. Well, I wouldn't want to know how you do against something like Army in Black or Melting Love. He had cut it. He stood in front of that box, which didn't move, and looked down. He didn't die or disappear. Well, that's how abnormalities work, apparently. That's been established in the Bottom Corporation. So he left it, and understood that his office was no more, and Denver was most likely dead, along with the other fixers under his employ. He knew he had to leave before the taboo hunters caught up with him, and go to somewhere safe, as he saw that the city needed to be punished. Right. Angela and Roland, the black stain, would have much to talk about with you, Virgilius. As they felt like that as well. Well, your interests and theirs would certainly be aligned. It felt ironic, as when he had nothing left to lose, he remembered one who had everything that mattered taken away. He remembered speaking to this fixer, who asked if Virgilius was still living a simple life, that if he got a colour, he should try doing things that raked in the money. Virgilius told him that marriage seemed worthwhile. This fixer asked if it looked like that. Virgilius considered his days becoming duller than when he first saw them, likely referring to him watching over the orphans, where now they're strangely mixed with laughter, which made him feel bad, likely due to the circumstances that was why they were there in the first place. This fixer sees T, feeling that they could see everything, even though if he wore a mask in front of them before, the burdensome look remained. If it was seen, it'd be a sign that they'd have met often. They only worked together during the Bloody Night incident, a case that this fixer was drawn to. Okay, let's see what we have so far to work on. Marriage, mask, Bloody Nights. Apparently, he was one of the few that looked at him straight in the eye, saying that it was a burden. His face wasn't visible. Concentrating on hiding and suppressing himself was now, at that point, willing to reveal that face by making a long rant by themselves. Then Virgilius asked if he could have gone to another nest. Why are they living in the back streets of District 9? Wait, District 9? Okay. Apparently some were rejected from the nest they wanted to go to, and that it was okay in those back streets. Then he remembered that many cases existed where a fixer who had reached a certain position was denied a nest migration pass. Or permit. Well, one of those two, according to previous requests, actions, or contracts. While on the other hand, there are places that are less discriminating, where they'd want such a high-ranking fixer in their nest. This fixer then continued to talk to Virgilius, telling him that he can go into a nest if he'd like to, but the location was important, along with the right house in a good position, the rising house prices, what will happen next, surrounding schools, and the fact that it's difficult to move to a different nest easily, without a special reason. Wait, nest migration. That's another clue, isn't it? Virgilius then told this fixer that the more they talked, the more they sounded greedy, which wasn't denied. Then Virgilius was asked what his selfish desire was. Those that reached a certain grade must want at least one thing. Virgilius couldn't argue with that, as those that decide to ascend must do their best, as it was so easy to fall. To climb required selfish desire, greed-fueled or otherwise. Then Virgilius asked if what he was doing next was the last request he would attend to. Apparently he had to do this, that it was amazing that it was the last thing that he did with him. Then Virgilius was about to tell this fixer his desires that he had, and the world that was drawn to his heart, or rather drawn in his heart, understanding that he hated what he saw currently, bowing his head and covering his face, as if to embrace the sins of the city. This was why Virgilius thought that he was qualified to understand his world. This fixer asked if he really believed that. That it was pretty cool too, that those who received a colour didn't know how all the screws came off of what they saw around them. Virgilius told him to forget it, that he must think that it's a pointless joke anyway. Apparently he didn't, at least not fully. This fixer thought that the reason for that he said what he did was that he thought that it was possible for Virgilius, but he shouldn't take it seriously. That's that, and this is this. Okay, I think we know who Virgilius is talking to at this point, and indeed when this is. Virgilius looked at him quietly with a smirk, telling this fixer that he couldn't say that he knew him well, but he didn't think that it was a word that really suited him. He must have been tired as well. He was reluctant to stop staring at him. So he went off to carry out his request. And then the white nights and dark days happened, and the sound of a piano sounded. Oh. Virgilius was talking to Roland, the Black Silence, just before the white nights and dark days. And that was over 6 months before the events of Leviathan. Yes, Roland was denied a nest migration pass due to him screwing over Pluto. And then he was on a request with Olivier, and then the pianist attacked District 9's backstreets, and yeah, we know what happened after, don't we? Certainly to Angelica. Then before he noticed it, there was someone talking to him in the dark room that Virgilius was in, asking if he was involved in that. It was the voice he hadn't heard in a while. One with a terrible poison and life with a strong smell of blood. Ah yes. Roland in the middle of his massacre or rampage. After he lost his family. After the pianist instance, he wanted to know if anyone had anything to do with it, no matter how small. He didn't realize that his deep energy was the strong perseverance of a smuggler who was able to completely hide everything in the shadows. Apparently Virgilius approved of it, but he wasn't involved in the pianist instance. Yeah. He could almost see the crying eyes behind that mask. Behind those eyes was a rage that was gained through personal loss. Virgilius heard about it and was sorry about his loss. He wondered why he thought that he was involved. Roland asked if he felt sad, telling him to get rid of that blasphemous noise. Yes, his sadness was sincere, but the weight was his alone to bear. Consolation couldn't be added in this case. He needed to mourn on his own terms. They could do nothing about each other. It would change nothing. He needed to choose his words carefully, as if he got it wrong, Roland would try and kill him. And he would have to defend against a grief-stricken Colorfixer. Roland then spoke of the world that Virgilius wanted. Virgilius then asked if this was about the conversation they had over a week ago. He told Roland that he got it completely wrong. It was just a dream that he once had. It's hard to even run. It was just theoretical at that point. They looked at each other, and not long after, Roland told him that it would be better if it was true. He then opened the front door, disappeared into darkness and silence, never to be seen again. Yeah, we know where he went to eventually. And this is a spoiler for Library of Ruina, so I'll leave a warning when this happens, so that you can mute this. Okay, you have fair warning now. He's in the library, after it was moved to the outskirts along the rest of District 12's nest, around the end of Library of Ruina. Certainly not in the best position. Back in the present, Virgilius remembered his words, which were swirling in his throat, where if such a world really comes, even Roland will be able to rest. He was silent. It felt like an uninvited guest. He decided to create such a world. Then he heard a noise from one of the test tubes. Most were forcibly opened. Those children affected by the glass window technology were dead on the floor. Only one of those test tubes was unopened, and it was slowly opening. This surprised Virgilius, and for good reason, as he saw Lapis appear to be alive, but also undistorted, even if she had an expressionless look on her. When he spoke her name, he saw that while there were no visible wounds, the eyes no longer had the light that was in them in the past, not stopped by the yoke of time, and looking at the other world beyond. She told him that she wasn't Lapis, she was Charon. To put this into context, Charon in Greek mythology was the ferryman of the underworld, who transported souls given the funeral rites, in exchange for the coins that were the payment for transits. Charon in the source material was in Virgil's Aeneid, who showed the golden bar in order to pay him for entry as Virgil was still alive. Golden bar, which opens the way to the Elysian fields. That's the good part of the ancient Greek afterlife. Inside the body, Lapis was dead. This was a completely different being. The light that he What was a lighthouse was now just a shadow reflected on the water. There was no more island. He decided to turn his back on Charon. No need to try and connect to one that he had no connection to. Yet Charon followed him. Where all those except them, Gupo and Azia, were killed. They saw management equipment and recording devices. He printed out and organized all the technical data that he could find, even though parts of it were bloodstained, as he could use all of it, as it was high value. Then Charon approached him, telling him that she was hungry. Virgilius didn't respond to what was now a stranger in Lapis's body. She walked to another place. He continued to gather documents that contain valuable information. Fixes and wings that can make good deals will make themselves known. It might be enough to provide him what he needed for what was next. Then he saw the corpses of Rikoko and Nansu, seeing the eyes of one who was stabbed in the back, and then he took his coat off, or rather the blood cloak, and covered the shattered corpse of Nansu. Clearly, he believes in respect for the dead. Either that or he thought, well, this power is more trouble than it's worth. Either that or he made the blood cloak disappear into himself, only thinking of manifesting it again when he needed it. Then he saw Charon, the one that used to be Lapis, asking what she was doing. Charon was picking up something shiny and hot. Charon stretched out her hand, one without any vigilance or fear. Then something in Myung-chi, or his solar plexus, he felt pain again. The pain of the hand stabbing his back in the cross-section of that world was more tolerable. Charon indicated a red jewel, the jewel that Garnet entered, which was shattered by the abnormality that Virgilius had defeated at great cost. The jewel was shattered and cracked, the shine lost and losing its warmth. Yes, the fragment that she was holding was shining like a cry. The only one among the fragments that still retained that warmth. When Virgilius tried to grab the piece that she offered, she withdrew it again, telling him that it was Charon's, as she found it in the pile, that it was nice because it was warm. Virgilius asked if she knew what the name of what was in that shiny fragment was. She said Garnet, a jewel that shined red, which was painful to Virgilius. The heart that didn't want to mix any words was melting away to that child. He asked why his heart was doing what he didn't want it to do. Then one of the lab doors exploded, and dozens of armed men were surrounding his front. He saw them as taboo hunters. They can be different in many ways. Not caring who was in front of him, he was ready to fight once more. Then he heard someone speak that LCA task force had entered the operational position. They found Red, currently under siege in the form of Camp 2. This didn't matter to Virgilius. He would fight any obstacles on the road ahead, as long as he was able to. He tried to give strength to the hand holding his sword. Then he heard from someone, "No, I don't have to see any more blood." Who walked out of the group of armed men. This was a woman with hair that looked white from a distance, but was grey when viewed up close. There was no agitation or tension in Virgilius's appearance holding the hilts. He could see that she was not affiliated with Encore, and the men among her were not taboo hunters. He felt a familiar feeling. It was too boring to say that it was casual. She introduced herself as Faust from Limbus Company. Ah yes, the Zweihander-wielding member of the Damned Dozen. Well, that's what I call them. This was the first that Virgilius had heard of this company. He believed that it must have been attacked by the technology of that lab. More likely they utilized Yi-Sang's mirror technology, where there are lesser alternatives available, but it's more stable. Apparently she knew what he wanted and that she could help. He didn't think that this had any weight, that it was like the lip service from an office worker. Then she offered to bring back Lapis and Garnet. He stared at her silently. He was trying to walk his own path. But then he saw the red colour of shattered jewels and a familiar, yet different child, who gave him the warmth of that light. Faust's words made him turn his head towards the light, even if it was faint, making him think of the faded promises of the past. She then asked, how was the Red Gaze? Would he like to work with Limbus Company? All he said as he closed his eyes was, let's hear the story. Yeah, that's how Virgilius, the Red Gaze, joined Limbus Company. As a guide to the Damned Dozen, with Charon as the driver of the bus, who has no problem with running over any that stand in the way. I suspect that the glowing shard will grow back and form Dante, the distortion that used to be Garnet. He'll likely be part of an in-universe explanation of how those that died in battle can be brought back. Considering that he has a clock for a head, he likely has some time-based abilities that would rival that of Teacorp's singularity, which he could use to turn back time. And it was also interesting that he talked with Roland, the selfish bull, at least a week prior to the pianist incident, and his rampage that cut through a thumb subsidiary, half of the south in the middle, rather, and many others. Some deserving, some not. As before that request, he spoke of his wife being alive, and after, he was asking around if he knew what was going on. Clearly he must have liked Virgilius, which was why he didn't try to kill him. As for why he was without the blood cloak in the trailer, it was because he left it with none sealed to cover his mutilated corpse. Either that or it was just his coat that he retrieved from Garnet after he left it on the ground. And the blood coat... The blood cloak was brought back in him, where he'd bring it out when there was a need for it. Well, he's certainly using his Gladius once more. Yeah, he needs a new suit then, and the services of the tailors, they can be hard to come by at the best of times. Well, I assume that Limbus Company will provide a replacement based on the trailer. From what I can tell from the available information, Limbus Company will involve traveling from district to district to gather golden bowers from the sealed branches of the Lobotomy Corporation, fighting off the monstrosities, the scum, the abnormalities, and the aberrations that are either trapped within them or on the way to them, while wielding the power of EGO and Yi Sang's mirror technology to wield the abilities of alternates. Yes, parallel worlds exist and can be accessed through the mirror technology. There's even a mirror dungeon to level up alternates. I suspect that an early version of this technology might have been what altered Iori. The Purple Tear. Yes, she has the power to travel to other universes. Yes, I don't think she's done with Virgilius yet. I just know it. Then we have Gubo and Asia. Yes, that might be a problem, as it might just be a matter of time before that bus drives through District 14. Will the Taboo Hunters come for Limbus Company and decide to kill Virgilius to finish what they started, along with any that might try to protect him? Well, regardless, we'll learn more about the city than we currently do in Limbus Company. Yes, in Limbus Company, as the travel of that bus proceeds. A travel through hell. Well, as close to hell as it's possible to go to without dying. Because as the song, the main theme of Limbus Company would put it, in hell we live lament. Well, you get the idea if I got it wrong. Well, that's the end of Leviathan. Now for Limbus Company. And I shall be making a lore series of that as well as a main series.